deep within the bowels of the shadowed forest, where ancient oaks seemed to claw at the perpetually gloomy sky with gnarled, leafless fingers, lay the forgotten cemetery of Oakhaven. Here, gravestones, tilted and cracked by centuries of neglect, were swallowed by grasping ivy that looked more like veins than vines. The air did not merely hang, it suffocated. A heavy mist saturated with the metallic scent of damp earth, rotting leaves, and unspeakable dread. The residents of the nearby village knew this place was not just abandoned. It was cursed. They whispered tales of the Nightwalker, a creature belonging neither to the world of the living nor the dead. Elders claimed it was the remnant of an ancient executioner, cursed to roam the earth, forever denied the peace of the grave. They said it appeared on moonless nights, when the veil between worlds thins to the transparency of a spider web, seeking fresh souls to sat its eternal burning hunger. That night, Elara broke the village's cardinal rule. Grief for her beloved grandmother, buried only yesterday in the potter's field at the cemetery's edge, eclipsed her fear. She couldn't bear the thought of the old woman spending her first night alone in this cold, unforgiving ground. Armed only with a rusted iron lantern, its flame trembling at the slightest gust of wind, she made her way through the forest. Every rustle of leaves sounded like stealthy footsteps. Every tree shadow stretched into an elongated, bony hand reaching for her cloak. Reaching the fresh mound of earth, Elara fell to her knees. The soil was still loose and dark. She began to whisper prayers, tears rolling down her cheeks, hot tracks in the biting cold. "I'm here, Nana," she whispered. "I'm here." Suddenly, the loud snap of a dry branch tore through the graveyard silence like a gunshot. Elara froze. Her heart hammered wildly in her chest, a frantic bird trapped in a cage, echoing in her ears like war drums. She slowly raised the lantern, her hand shaking so violently the shadows danced a macabre waltz. She tried to pierce the darkness with its feeble yellow light, and then she saw it. It towered among the twisted tree trunks, blacker than the night itself, as if the darkness had coalesced into solid form. Its body was gaunt, a skeletal frame, barely covered by tatters of gray flesh and rags that might once have been a burial shroud. Long, sinewy limbs hung low, ending in razor-sharp talons capable of tearing through stone or flesh with ease. But most terrifying were the eyes, 2 points of burning, malevolent red fire, staring straight at her with an ancient, insatiable hunger. It did not breathe. It rattled. It was the Nightwalker, and it had found its prey. A primal scream of terror tore from Elara's throat, but was instantly swallowed by the oppressive silence of the cemetery, as if the fog itself were eating the sound. She scrambled to her feet, nearly dropping the lantern. The creature took a step forward, its movements unnaturally jerky, twitching like a marionette with tangled strings, yet horrifyingly fast. Elara. She sprinted blindly through the labyrinth of tombstones, stumbling over exposed roots and fallen crosses. The fog seemed to thicken, turning the graveyard into a white maze. Behind her echoed not a human tread, but a strange, wet-scraping sound, the sound of claws dragging on stone and heavy, raspy breathing that sounded like wind whistling through a dry rib cage. She could feel its approach, a wave of unnatural cold radiating from its dead body, raising the hairs on her neck. She knew the legends. Those caught by the walker were not simply killed. They were dragged underground, alive, to be stored in its larder, their screams muffled by 6 feet of earth. Panic blinded her. Elara tripped over a fragment of a shattered angel statue and fell hard, the taste of copper filling her mouth. She was at the foot of a massive ancient crypt, the mausoleum of the vanished Van der Hoven family, grown into the hillside. Desperation gave her hysterical strength. She noticed that one of the heavy stone slabs at the crypt's base had crumbled at the corner. Clawing at the dirt and stone with fingers scraped raw, she shifted the debris just enough to create a gap. She squeezed inside, the stone scraping skin from her back. She wedged herself into the narrow, dark opening, and in that same instant a terrible, thunderous blow shook the stone wall from the outside. Elara was trapped. Absolute darkness reigned inside the crypt. The air was stale, thick with the chemical smell of saltpeter, old dust, and the sweet, sickly scent of mummification. Her lantern remained outside, smashed. She heard the creature raging on the other side of the wall, inches from her face. The Nightwalker did not intend to give up. It let out an unearthly shriek, a sound like metal tearing that made Elara's blood run cold. It began to methodically batter the entrance with its talons. Scrape, scrape, thud, stone cracked. Dust rained down on Elara's head. She crawled deeper into the crypt, her hand brushing against something hard and round a skull. She stifled a scream and pressed her back against a cold, damp marble sarcophagus in the center of the room. She wrapped her arms around her knees, trying to become invisible, to merge with the darkness, praying to gods she hadn't believed in until this moment. The night turned into an endless siege. The creature would scratch at the walls, testing for weaknesses, then silence would fall a heavy, pregnant silence that was worse than the noise. Then the psychological torture began. From outside a voice drifted in. It wasn't the guttural growl of a monster. It was a soft, wavering, elderly voice. "Elara, let me in, child. It's cold out here." It was her grandmother's voice. Elara clamped her hands over her ears, tears streaming silently down her face. The creature could mimic its prey. It was using her grief as a key to unlock the door. "Open the door, Elara. Don't you love me?" The voice wheezed, shifting into a mockery of a sob that ended in a low, inhuman click. Elara bit her lip until it bled to keep from screaming. She curled tighter into a ball, surrounded by the silent remains of the long-dead Van der Hovens. She realized with horror that she was envious of them. They were already dead. They had nothing left to fear. Hours bled into one another. Exhaustion began to warp her reality. It seemed to her that the shadows inside the crypt were moving, that the lid of the sarcophagus behind her was slowly sliding open. She was trapped between the monster outside and the dead inside. Just when she felt her mind begin to fracture, a long, slender talon pierced the small gap she had entered through. It hooked into the air, blindly grasping, searching, inches from her boot. Elara pulled her legs in, holding her breath until her lungs burned. The claw retracted, scratching the stone in frustration. Then silence. Not the waiting silence, but a true emptiness. Dawn was approaching. The first, still gray rays of the sun were deadly poison to the Nightwalker. It had retreated to the deepest shadows of the forest to escape the burning light. Elara sat motionless for a long time, even when faint morning light filtered through the crack between the stones, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the stagnant air. She looked around the crypt. She had spent the night sitting next to a skeleton in a rotted velvet dress. Only when the singing of birds finally dispelled the silence of the night did she dare to move. Her limbs were stiff, her body bruised and frozen. She crawled out of the crypt, dirty, trembling, her eyes wide and hollow. The cemetery and the light of day looked simply old and neglected. The monsters were gone. But as Elara walked back to the village, ignoring the horrified looks of the early risers who saw her grave dirt stained clothes, she knew the truth. She had survived the night of horror, but she had not escaped. As she entered her home and looked into the dark corner of her hallway, for a split second she didn't see shadows. She saw two burning red points of light, blinking out just as she turned her head. The Nightwalker knew her scent now. It knew her name, and the moon would not stay full forever.